From the moment Spain was unified, it rose to become one of the most powerful kingdoms in the world. For centuries, its rule extended far beyond the Iberian Peninsula. The Spanish crown controlled territories scattered across the oceans, and its mighty naval fleet carried goods and soldiers that maintained colonies across the globe. At its peak, Spain was described as the empire on which the sun never set. Gold and silver flowed into its ports from the mines of Latin America. These treasures were the foundation of royal revenues and allowed Spain to dominate European politics for a time. Yet the same wealth that strengthened the monarchy also brought ruin. The more precious metals Spanish ships carried across the Atlantic, the less valuable gold became. Inflation spiraled across Europe, and Spain was forced to import even more bullion to meet the enormous expenses of the crown. This resource trap weakened the economy and drained the treasury. By the dawn of the 18th century, the Spanish monarchy stood on the brink of collapse. The army was reduced to a small force of mercenaries no larger than 15,000 men. The kingdom could not even produce its own uniforms or weapons, and had to rely on France for supplies. The decline of Spain's royal house made matters worse. For generations, the Habsburgs of Spain had intermarried with their Austrian cousins. These unions preserved political alliances but damaged the health of the dynasty. Each new generation carried more illnesses, and the bloodline weakened. Charles II of Spain, who came to the throne in 1665, was frail from birth. He was unable to govern effectively and incapable of producing heirs. His death would mean the extinction of the Spanish Habsburgs. The problem of succession immediately sparked ambitions among Europe's most powerful rulers. The French King Louis XIV and his son put forward their claims. The Austrian Emperor Leopold I did the same. Even Britain and the Netherlands feared what might come. They had recently fought against France to block its dominance over Europe. Now they worried that a union between France and Spain under one ruler would create an unstoppable power. To prevent such a scenario, the major powers reached an agreement in 1698, known as the Treaty of The Hague. According to this plan, the Spanish crown would pass to Joseph Ferdinand of Bavaria, who was the great-nephew of Charles II. France would be compensated with Naples and Sicily, while Austria would receive Lombardy. Spain itself was not consulted about the fate of its territories. Before this compromise could take effect, Joseph Ferdinand died suddenly. The question of succession once again threatened to plunge Europe into war. A second plan was drafted in the Treaty of London. This time, Charles of Habsburg, the younger son of Emperor Leopold, was chosen to inherit the Spanish crown. France would again receive territorial rewards, including Milan. Austria and Spain were not informed of this deal either. Both kingdoms reacted furiously. The Spanish were outraged at the thought of their empire being divided by outsiders. The Austrians were angered that Italian territories, which they considered more valuable than the Spanish throne itself, would be given away. Louis XIV moved swiftly. While he signed agreements that appeared to divide Spanish possessions, he secretly encouraged the Spanish nobility to believe France would defend the unity of their kingdom. His maneuver succeeded. When Charles II died on November 1st of the year 1700, his will named Philip, Duke of Anjou, the grandson of Louis XIV, as heir to the Spanish crown. Within 2 weeks, Philip was proclaimed Philip V of Spain. Louis added that Philip and his descendants could also claim the French throne. This opened the possibility of uniting the two greatest Catholic powers under a single monarch. Austria prepared for war. Britain and the Netherlands also prepared for war. Louis, meanwhile, tightened trade restrictions against his enemies, and even recognized the exiled James III of the Stuart line as King of Britain in an attempt to stir unrest. French troops quickly moved to secure the Spanish Netherlands and Lombardy. With the support of local garrisons, Austria responded by sending 35,000 soldiers under the command of Prince Eugene of Savoy, one of the most brilliant commanders of the age. His forces outmaneuvered the French along the Adige River, capturing Carpi and defeating them in ambushes at Chiari and Cremona. France sent reinforcements under Marshal Vendôme, but the battles drained both sides. In 1702, hostilities officially escalated when Britain entered the war. John Churchill, later known as the Duke of Marlborough, led English forces to the Netherlands, where they allied with the Dutch. Together, they besieged fortresses and threatened the French border. Louis XIV sought allies and found one in the Duke of Bavaria, Maximilian II. By promising him the Spanish Netherlands, Louis drew Bavaria into the war on the French side. Franco-Bavarian armies pushed toward Vienna. The Duke of Marlborough refused to allow Austria to be crushed. In 1704, he marched his army through Germany while deceiving the French into thinking he was headed for the Spanish Netherlands. The maneuver brought him into alliance with Prince Eugene of Savoy. Together, they confronted the Franco-Bavarian forces at the village of Blenheim. Marshal Tallard planned to encircle the enemy, but Marlborough and Eugene struck first. The French center collapsed. The Bavarians fled. 40,000 soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured, and Marshal Tallard himself was taken prisoner. The defeat was catastrophic. Bavaria was occupied. France withdrew its remaining armies from Germany. For the first time in decades, France appeared vulnerable. Elsewhere, the war spread to the seas. Spanish treasure fleets laden with silver and gold tried to cross the Atlantic under French escort. The British Navy sought to intercept them. In 1702, a major battle off Vigo Bay allowed the British to capture ships and millions of pesos in treasure, though much of it had already been secured inland. British naval power grew rapidly. In 1704, Admiral George Rooke carried Archduke Charles of Habsburg, newly proclaimed as Charles III of Spain, to Portugal. On the way, he captured Gibraltar. The rock's natural defenses made it almost impregnable, but the small garrison fell quickly. Gibraltar became a permanent British possession. Attempts by French and Spanish forces to retake it failed despite long sieges and naval battles off Malaga. In Spain itself, the conflict raged between supporters of Philip V and supporters of Charles III. At first, Charles gained ground with British backing. He occupied Madrid and much of the East Coast. Yet he was seen as a foreign prince backed by Protestant armies. Uprisings against him erupted. Philip refused to surrender and rallied loyal Spaniards. At the Battle of Almanza in 1707, Franco-Spanish troops decisively defeated Charles's forces. Control of most of Spain returned to Philip. Still, the Allies advanced on other fronts. In Italy, Prince Eugene defeated the French at Turin, saving Savoy. In the Spanish Netherlands, Marlborough captured fortress after fortress, defeating French armies at Ramillies and later at Oudenarde. France reeled but continued to fight. By 1710, the war reached a turning point. The largest battle took place at Malplaquet, where more than 200,000 soldiers clashed. The Allies won the field but suffered such heavy losses they could no longer drive into France itself. Meanwhile, in Spain, Charles briefly captured Madrid again after victories at Almanar and Zaragoza. But once more popular resistance forced him out. French General Vendôme pursued him relentlessly and crushed his forces. The Habsburg cause in Spain was doomed. Then in 1711, events shifted dramatically. Emperor Joseph I of Austria died suddenly. His brother Charles, the Habsburg claimant to Spain, inherited the imperial crown as Charles VI. This created a new dilemma. The Allies had fought to prevent a union of Spain with France, yet now they faced the possibility of Spain uniting with Austria under Charles. Support for continuing the war collapsed, especially in Britain. Peace negotiations began in the Dutch city of Utrecht. The talks dragged on as each side sought favorable terms. In 1713, a treaty was finally signed. Philip V was recognized as King of Spain, but he renounced any claim to the French throne. France and Spain could never be united under one monarch. Britain gained Gibraltar and Minorca, as well as valuable colonies in North America. The Austrian Habsburgs gained the Spanish Netherlands, Naples, Milan, and Sardinia. Savoy received Sicily. France ceded territories in Canada and elsewhere to Britain. Austria signed its own peace a year later, when it became clear it could not fight alone. The War of the Spanish Succession reshaped the balance of power in Europe. France, though battered, remained the leading continental power, able to field new armies despite defeats. Britain emerged as a true naval giant whose fleet would underpin a global empire. Austria expanded its possessions in Italy and the Low Countries. Spain, however, was removed from the ranks of great powers. Philip V began reforms to modernize his kingdom and reassert royal authority. In 1715, he reconquered Catalonia and the Balearic Islands. A few years later, he attempted unsuccessfully to recover former Spanish territories in Italy. The Golden Age of Spain had ended. The empire that had once stretched across the world now adjusted to a reduced role in European politics. Yet the war had ensured that no single power could dominate the continent completely.